My name is Clara Vance, and I am 36 years old. I gave my father's printing company 22 years of my blood, sweat, and youth, right up until the day he handed the entire business over to my little sister. He did it in front of the whole shop floor. His entire explanation for erasing 2 decades of my life was one single sentence. She is just better with people. There was a sheet cake. There was a cheap printed banner. There were 11 loyal employees staring awkwardly at their shoes, while my dad smiled like a man doing something incredibly generous. I didn't yell. I packed my desk into a single box in 20 minutes, hung my shop keys on the rusty nail by the back door, and touched my grandfather's vintage press on the way out. I didn't slam a single door. Exactly 1 week later, their biggest hospital client refused to renew a $200,000 contract. Then a massive grocery chain walked away. By the end of the month, my parents were desperately calling my phone. 3 voicemails in a single night. I just smiled and let it ring. Because what my family didn't understand yet, what would take them 8 agonizing months to figure out, was that they hadn't actually given my sister the company. They had only given her the wooden sign out front, and what they did to that sign. Well, that is the part of the story I really need you to hear. Welcome back to the channel where quiet women finally stop holding everything together, and families learn the brutal cost of taking them for granted. If you have ever done all the heavy lifting while somebody else took the applause, this story belongs to you. Drop a comment below and make sure to subscribe. Let me take you back to the time before the cake. 5:00 a.m. Vance Custom Printing, Scranton, Pennsylvania. I unlocked the heavy side door the exact same way I had since I was a teenager. I started the coffee maker and walked the production floor. There were 6 massive jobs on the schedule board. I could tell you which printing press was going to give us trouble just by the sound it made warming up, the same way a mother knows a fake cough from a real one. I had been doing some version of this since I was 14 years old. My grandfather, Arthur, used to pay me $5 a Saturday to sweep up paper scraps and keep my opinions to myself. By the time I was 18, I was working full-time. By 26, I was running the entire operation. Scheduling, cost estimates, press checks, vendor lists, freight logistics, and the panicked midnight phone calls. When Oak Ridge Medical Center needed 30,000 patient folders printed in 5 days, they didn't call the office line. They called my personal cell phone. Here is the strangest math of my entire life. Every major client we had knew my name, but my own business card didn't even have a job title on it. Dad kept saying he was meaning to get to it. But I never complained, because in that building, my name meant something better than an empty title. It meant the work would be flawless. The public face of our family, my father, never came into the office before 9:00 a.m. But the whole town believed that shop ran entirely on his charm. My dad, Richard Vance, is the greatest salesman I have ever watched work. That isn't bitterness. It's a professional fact. He remembers the name of every client's wife, every kid, every dog. He closes massive deals on the golf course that other printers couldn't close in a boardroom. That was our division of labor. Dad promised impossible things to people over warm handshakes, and I went back to the shop and made those promises come true. He would swear we could finish a catalog in 6 days when the schedule clearly said 9. Then he'd go home for dinner. I would stay. Me and Marcus, our lead pressman of 31 years, splitting a cold pizza at midnight, doing the impossible quietly so my father could still be a local legend at his morning networking breakfasts. I want to be fair. Dad really loved his clients, and they loved him. But somewhere along the line, he decided that his charisma was the actual product, and the ink on the paper was just an afterthought. And here is the secret I never told anyone. In 40 years, my father never once ran a printing press. He couldn't even load paper stock without jamming the machine. None of that mattered. Until the day it was the only thing that mattered. My little sister, Chloe, moved back home 2 years ago. She is 5 years younger than me, and I will say this clearly. Chloe is talented. She spent 7 years at a sleek marketing agency in Philadelphia, doing corporate brand identity work. She came back to Scranton wearing an oat milk-colored blazer and holding a PowerPoint presentation called Vance Printing 2. Dad watched her slides like he was watching a fireworks display. There were charts about brand story and visual identity, and a word cloud where the biggest word was authentic. She did a massive audit of the company. Quietly, politely, my name was removed from the client emails. Requests that used to come straight to my phone started routing through a generic address called Hello Advance Print. Chloe called it streamlining the funnel. Then, one Tuesday, I found the new organizational chart taped to the break room wall. Dad's box said, Founder. Chloe's box said, Brand Director. And way down at the bottom, there was a gray rectangle labeled, Production. Just the word production, not my name. It was as if the building itself had naturally grown me out of the concrete floor. Marcus, our lead pressman, walked up behind me, tapped the gray box with an ink-stained finger, and shook his head before walking away. I took the chart down and hid it in my drawer, telling myself it was just a draft. That winter, Dad turned 65 and started testing the word retirement. The whole town assumed I was taking over. I had built the relationships. Everyone knew who kept the trains running. Even my mother, Alina, would squeeze my shoulder at Sunday dinners and whisper, Big year coming, sweetheart. Nobody said Chloe's name, but the calendar had teeth in it. Our contract with Oak Ridge Medical Center, our absolute biggest client, worth $200,000 a year, running for 18 straight years, was up for renewal in April. I had already built the prep binder. For years, Dad always said, We are family. Family doesn't need employment contracts or paperwork. He meant it as warmth, but I was about to learn that sentence cuts in both directions. On a random Friday in April, Dad called a mandatory meeting on the main floor between the heavy presses. I noticed the details in the wrong order. First, a white sheet cake with blue lettering. Then a large banner printed on our wide format machine, which meant someone ran it the night before while I was gone. Then, Chloe in her blazer. Then, my mother standing in the back, looking like she was at a funeral. Dad gave a long, teary speech about family legacy. Then, cheerful as a weatherman, he said it. So, starting June 1st, I am handing the keys to Chloe. She's going to take this place into the future. The room did something I will never forget. Every single head turned toward me. Not Chloe, me. Marcus's jaw dropped. Alina, our bindery manager, literally said, Wait, what? Out loud. I stood incredibly still. I asked the only question that mattered in the calmest voice I had. Who is running operations? My father waved his hand dismissively in front of 11 loyal employees and my grandfather's vintage Heidelberg press. Oh, we'll figure all that out, he chuckled. Chloe is just the right fit. She's just better with people. There it was. 22 years of 2:00 a.m. press runs weighed against a PowerPoint presentation. And the PowerPoint won. Chloe stepped forward, all sunshine and smiles, and announced her first initiative, a full corporate rebrand, a new logo, new colors, and a new name. Vance Custom Printing sounds a little dusty, she said. My mother laughed nervously. Somebody cut the cake. I stood in the middle of my life's work while my family ate frosting off cheap paper plates. I didn't yell. I walked to my desk, packed it into a single cardboard box in 20 minutes. I left every client file, every vendor list, and every password neatly printed in the top drawer. That is the difference between leaving a company and burning it to the ground. I walked to the side door, hung my keys on the nail, and put my hand flat against my grandfather's Heidelberg press one last time. My mother caught me in the parking lot. Clara, please don't make a scene, she whispered. I looked at her, holding my box. I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm making an exit. 7 days. That is all gravity needed to pull the sky down. On Wednesday morning, David Sterling, the purchasing director for Oak Ridge Medical, called my personal cell phone. Clara, hey, nobody has confirmed the press check for the massive patient folder run on Thursday. I didn't sigh. I didn't complain. I simply said, I don't work there anymore, David. Chloe runs it now. Just call the office. There was a heavy silence on the line. Then David asked quietly, Clara, does the office actually know how to finish this job? I looked out my window and said, I guess we're all going to find out. The hospital renewal meeting happened that Friday. Marcus gave me the details later. Chloe walked into a hospital procurement meeting with a slide deck about brand engagement metrics and her new sunset-colored logo. David Sterling sat through the presentation with a poker face. When she finished, he asked his questions. Who confirms the turnaround? What is the backup plan when a press breaks down? Who do I call at 10:00 p.m. when the proof is wrong? Chloe answered every question with corporate buzzwords. We are building an exciting new team structure. David closed his folder, thanked them for 18 years, and pulled the contract. $200,000 a year, gone before the coffee even got cold. Dad called it a transition bump. He never realized that the contract wasn't with his company. It was with the woman who always picked up the phone at midnight. A week later, Sterling Foods, a massive grocery chain, pulled their $140,000 flyer contract because Chloe deleted my proofing checklist, calling it a legacy bottleneck. The flyers printed with the wrong meat and laundry soap prices. 9 grocery stores had to honor the misprints, and they billed the shop for the massive losses. To cover the loss, Chloe fired Marcus. 31 years at the company, and they walked him out before lunch, blaming him for the flyer error. My phone started ringing. Voicemail 1, my mother. Clara, things are chaotic. We think you are blowing this out of proportion. Call us. Voicemail 2, Dad. The hospital is just being dramatic. Come straighten out the production side for a while. They didn't apologize. They didn't offer my job back. They just wanted the mechanic to come fix the machine quietly in the dark. I didn't call back. In mid-May, Chloe threw a launch party for her rebranded company, Lumina Print Studio. I wasn't invited, but I drove past the shop that night. There were string lights, champagne flutes, and a projector showing off the new logo on the brick wall. And then my headlights hit the dumpster by the loading dock. Sticking out of the garbage, buried under bubble wrap, was the sign. The 6-foot oak sign with gold letters, Vance Printing, hand-painted by my grandfather Arthur in 1969. It had hung over that door for 56 years. They unbolted it and threw it in the trash. I parked my truck, climbed into the dumpster in my good clothes, and hauled it out. My father gave Chloe the company, fine. But that night, they threw away the only thing I actually wanted. I laid the sign in my garage and spent weeks restoring it. And then I looked at my bank account, $43,000 in savings. I called Marcus, who was sitting depressed in his kitchen. I said, Marcus, hypothetically, if I did something incredibly stupid, would you do it with me? Marcus didn't even ask what it was. He just said, when do we start? I leased an abandoned hardware store downtown. It had high ceilings and 3-phase industrial power. I took out a small business loan, bought a used digital press and a heavy-duty cutter. I made 3 strict rules for myself. 1, I would never call a single client from my dad's shop. If they came, they had to come on their own. 2, I would never speak badly about my family in public. 3, everything would be in the daylight. My name on the lease. My name on the door. I registered the business under my legal name, Vance Printing Company. The exact name Chloe threw in the garbage. Word travels fast in Scranton. Dad called me furiously. You're using our name. You're punishing this family. I replied calmly. It is my name too, Dad. You threw it in a dumpster. I just picked it up. Their expensive lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter. I laughed and threw it away. You cannot publicly rebrand, throw a legacy name in the trash, and then sue someone with that actual legal surname for using it. The threat died quietly. Opening day was August 4th. We started small, church bulletins and funeral programs. By the end of the month, David Sterling's white hospital SUV parked outside my shop. He walked in, looked at the exposed brick, and placed a folder on my counter. Your sister's new vendor missed a massive delivery, he said. I need 3,000 patient folders in 72 hours with 0 errors. Marcus, Alina, who had quit Chloe's shop to join us, and I worked like a trauma unit. We stayed up until 2:00 a.m. hand-feeding the folding machine. We delivered the boxes 4 hours early. David checked the folders, signed the paperwork, and looked at me. You know, your dad always told people you were just better with machines. But you were the person we actually dealt with, Clara. The rest of it was just a free lunch. He signed a massive annual contract with us the next week. A month later, the school district moved their entire budget to us after Chloe's shop misprinted the date on 500 prestigious award programs. In November, for the first time in 56 years, my father's shop missed payroll. Chloe walked into my shop looking exhausted, her designer coat buttoned wrong. You're stealing my life, she whispered. I never made a single phone call, Chloe, I replied honestly. She looked around my thriving shop, smelling the ink she had banished from her own building. Dad never taught me the machines, Clara. He told me I was the face. I built my whole life on being the face. Then she left. I realized we were both victims of the exact same illusion. In December, Dad showed up outside my window in the snow. He came inside, sat on a stool, and slid his heavy keyring across my counter. He begged me to come back. He offered to sign ownership over to me immediately. We will tell the town it was a planned transition of leadership, he bargained. "Nobody has to be embarrassed. The family looks strong." There it was. He was offering me everything I ever wanted, wrapped in the one toxic lie that had suffocated me for 22 years. I slid the keys back to him. "No, Dad. If I take it back in the dark and lie to the town, then the story wins. The face beats the hands. I spent 22 years being your quiet miracle. I'm not doing it anymore." He looked utterly defeated. "So you'll just watch your grandfather's shop die?" "No," I said softly. "I watched it die in April, when there was cake." 3 weeks later, the bank foreclosed on Lumina Print Studio. In February, they held a bankruptcy auction on my grandfather's freezing shop floor. I stood in the crowd. When they brought out Lot 7, my grandfather's vintage Heidelberg press, I raised my bidding card. A dealer tried to outbid me for parts, but I wasn't bidding on metal. I was bidding on my childhood. I won the press for $4,200. As I wrote the check, my dad walked up to the press and placed his hand on the metal frame. "Arthur would have hired you before he ever hired me," he whispered. "It is May 2026 now." We moved the Heidelberg press into my shop, and it runs perfectly. I rented a scissor lift, and Marcus helped me bolt my grandfather's restored oak sign, Vance Printing, right over my front doors in the daylight. There is a deep satisfaction that lives in your shoulders when you drive a bolt into something that is finally true. Chloe is thriving in a corporate consulting firm in another city, the right tool in the right drawer at last. Dad visits my shop on Saturday mornings, drinks his coffee under the old sign, and tells his friends that his daughter's hard work saved the family legacy. If there is one thing I could hand to every quiet woman doing invisible work for people she loves, it is this: you cannot print a promise. You have to actually keep it. If the people at your table only see your value when you stop working, then stop. Stand in the daylight and build your own table where everyone can watch. That is my story. The cake on the floor, the sign in the dumpster, and the keys I slid back across the counter. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. And subscribe to the Last Chapter Stories, because there is always another quiet woman about to stand up.